Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths, and happy Labor Day. We know many of you will still be working today in the fields, trying to get ahead of the game after getting a late start on planting season. You've probably been wondering how your neighbors are doing as well. That was the goal of this year's ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour, and this year's numbers are important to producers after so many decided to take prevent plant, not plant at all, or planted very late. That is why we wanted to get boots on the ground and get you some answers. Here now is an encore presentation of our Crop Tour results broadcast.
From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, the good, the bad, and the unusual. We've seen it all on this year's Crop Tour. Plus, we dive into the final numbers.
When we put all the crop tour samples into one spreadsheet, calculate one average yield off of all the samples, that was down 6.9%.
A closer look at what dozens of scouts saw on the ground, checking out thousands of fields.
With the smaller South Dakota corn crop, what are ethanol plants going to do? We visit one coming up.
And from the air, team coverage on the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour.
Coverage of the 2019 ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by Pioneer, our premier sponsor, with support from IBM, RCIS, RAM, AeroVironment, Titan Tires, Farmable, and Farm Credit Services of America.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Markets preparing to start a new week of trade with fresh numbers from the team over at ProFarmer. It puts the national corn yield at 163 bushels per acre. That's about 6 bushels less than USDA's August report. That brings total production to 13.35 billion bushels, about 500 million bushels less than USDA. As for soybeans, ProFarmer is predicting an average yield of just 46.1 bushels to the acre. Now it estimates that the crop size is 3.49 billion bushels.
Well, we knew that the crops were immature coming into Crop Tour. And that's exactly what we found. What we didn't know was that the ear counts were going to be down and down as dramatically as they were in some of these 7 states that we sampled, and that the pod counts were going to be as low as they were. So that's the big takeaways. These numbers are driven by ear counts and pod numbers being down so much.
Because of the immaturity of the crop, you've got to stay nimble with your expectations on the supply side. It's weather conditions are going to have a major impact from this point forward on how both the corn and the soybean crop are going to finish. So you got to stay nimble based on what we know right now. That's the best estimate that we can put on the corn and soybean crops. Is it going to change? I would almost guarantee it.
Now, ProFarmer's reminding everyone their experts take into account crop tour data, but they also make adjustments for crop maturity, historical experience, and areas outside of the 7 states covered on Crop Tour. Prevent plant not factored into Crop Tour's figures since those acres will not be making grain this season, but scouts saw a lot of empty fields, including 3.8 million acres in South Dakota. That state on pace for the smallest crop in the entire Midwest, which could mean big problems for its ethanol industry. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon reports from the Western Leg.
Walking through the water hemp here.
South Dakota is having a year of challenges. Wet weather has yet to stop. Remnants of the difficulties littering the fields as the state holds the title for the most corn and soybean prevent plant acres in the nation.
You just see quarters upon quarters that there's nothing in.
While some fields are bare, scouts along the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour see the immaturity and uncertainty of the crop too.
Plenty of these ears are just recently removed within a week to 10 days of just finishing pollinating,
leaving the ethanol industry with uncertainties.
We don't have a shortage in the short term through, say, a normal harvest and like starting in November, but long term there is a shortage by November of 2020.
Burrish says the new Gen Energy facility in Marion, South Dakota is already trucking in corn from the western part of the state, over 100 miles away. And if the state does not produce a good yield or heavy test weights, it will have to bring in grain from other areas.
Let's say that it has a value of 30 under FOB in North Dakota. Well, to get it here by rail is probably going to cost upwards of 60 cents. For most plants down here in this region, those are just values that aren't sustainable.
The last time corn was imported to this region by the company from other states was back in the 2012-2013 timeframe, and margins were substantially better then.
Well, the price of ethanol is sharply lower compared to what they're paying for corn, and then having to pay on top of that, having to pay buy corn at a premium with a very strong basis, and then on top of that having to pay the shipping. So you've got margins really going the wrong way in a big way.
I noticed in one of them that we had a bug in there.
As South Dakota sorts through its difficulties before harvest,
In South Dakota, you never really complain about too much rain, but it's just what happened.
farmers hope to have more authority over the things they can try to control. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. This is on top of the Environmental Protection Agency issuing dozens of small refinery waivers that exempt them from the RFS mandate of blending ethanol. The president meeting with the heads of EPA and USDA to discuss those waivers and the impact on agriculture. In a memo, USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue recommended rescinding 7 or 8 of the 31 small refinery exemptions granted by EPA in August. Perdue saying via memo those waivers were made to big companies, adding that, quote, "By taking decisive action now, I believe we can regain support among farmers in the biofuel industry," end quote. EPA, however, raising questions about the legality of that move and standing firm against reallocating waived gallons.
Even the conversation, I think, is a good thing for the ethanol industry, but we need to see action. So, okay, fine, reverse them. I think it does make us look silly, but reverse them. But the question is really going to be, what happens after that? Are they going to come back 2 months later and grant another 37 SREs or something like that? Or does this stop the trend? Is this been the wake-up call that's been needed to say, okay, we realize there's a problem here. We have to take another look at granting all these SREs that we've been granting and move away from the waivers because, you know, destroying the RFS is destroying the ethanol industry.
President Trump and his cabinet officials ultimately deciding to keep the biofuel blending waivers in place, but will reportedly take steps to make up for the lost biofuel volumes. Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer is saying that a plan under development would encourage the use of gas that contains 15% ethanol. It would also increase by 500 million gallons the amount of conventional renewable fuels that have to be used in mandates. Up next, how all of this tour information, weather, and trade turmoil may impact markets in the coming weeks. We'll have analysis from the last stop in Rochester. And later, an eye in the sky, an aerial view of prevent plant acres from some of the most fertile fields in the Midwest.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
The numbers are in, the scouts are home. So where does the 2019 season go from here? Tyne Morgan asked that question from Rochester in today's analysis.
Here now with the each of the leg scout leads, as well as Chip Flory, to talk about, we've talked about supply. We know the final numbers. We saw what you saw this week, but that demand piece has just been so ugly, Jeff. And look at corn first. I mean, we really need demand to step up, no matter what the yield is this year.
Demand is a problem in both corn and beans. On corn, we got the ethanol slowing down. We've built up a stockpile of ethanol for this time of the year that's a record high. So we have an inventory that we need to wear off. Gasoline usage has fallen, so that's a problem because we're not blending as much. But we have seen some blending pick up during the summer season, so maybe that's a sign that we can get things going. The exports are atrocious right now because we're getting beat by the South Americans, who both Argentina and Brazil produced record crops, so they're selling below our prices. Their currencies have completely collapsed, and at some point they're going to have some problems with those currencies.
When you look at domestic demand, you mentioned it, those waivers from EPA, creating a lot of angst among farmers, rightfully so. What has to happen to reverse that?
Well, we've got to keep the pressure on the White House, and it's specifically on the White House. Keep your messages going into the president. Talk to your lawmakers, get them to put pressure on the White House. President Trump has got to put the pressure on Andrew Wheeler to reverse some of those decisions.
How much weight is that having on lost demand right now?
President Trump, number one, President Trump is tired of dealing with the situation, so we need to get him re-engaged with it. How much of an impact is it having? It's going to, with what happened with Poet, it's going to take 100 million bushels of demand out of the equation.
Well, when you look at soybeans, that's not a news story. We know that demand's been ugly when you look at ASF, when you look at trade war, different things. So what has to happen there? Is there any bright spot with demand that we could see prices respond positively?
Well, I think if South America has any kind of production problems, then that changes the equation somewhat. We know that ASF is going to reduce soybean demand from China. That opens opportunities for us to ship soybeans to other parts of the world. But if we have problems in Argentina and or Brazil, that would open up some more export opportunities for us in the year ahead.
So we're going to have to wait for Argentina and Brazil.
Well,
a problem
possibly,
there?
because that's kind of where we're at right now. We've taken our number one customer and we've told them to go shop somewhere else around the world. And at the same time, they also had African swine fever hit them and reduce their demand. So we've got two sources that are telling China not to buy as much.
Real quick, Chip, it's all about demand right now. Do you think the market could shift its focus back to supply?
Yes, eventually, once the combines start to roll. The numbers from ProFarmer, the numbers from the crop tour, I don't think that's enough to really shift the demand or the picture at this point. But we're gonna when the combines start to roll and we get the real answers, it'll be interesting.
Hey, and there's some hidden demand out there that could potentially happen. If we don't finish this crop well, it's going to not have as much energy value coming out of it, and that would use up the bushels a lot faster on corn. But that's something down the road. We won't see it happen until March and likely June in the quarterly stocks reports.
All right. Thank you all for joining us this week. We appreciate it. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll have more right here on Ag Day.
What do you call someone who does dozens of jobs? A farmer. At Pioneer, we're proud to work with generations of American farmers in the most complex and rewarding industry on earth. So from your friends at Pioneer, thank you, farmers. Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Welcome back to Ag Day on this Labor Day, the last big holiday weekend of our summer. Unfortunately, I suppose, but as we head into fall, there are things to look forward to as well. Now, if you live in Texas, western Oklahoma, some of you have gotten really dry, obviously. This was not here early in the season, but the drought monitor has gotten worse in those areas, especially pockets. You can see it's not everywhere. You get hit and miss thunderstorms occasionally, although you haven't had too many lately, which do help some areas. Parts of the Four Corner region, you're better than you were earlier in the season, but still on the dry side. And there's still pockets in the southeast, a few spots through the northern Mississippi Valley into parts of the western Great Lakes. And obviously it's dry for you folks anyway in the Pacific Northwest. Now you go back 4 weeks, look how much less orange there was, but we keep adding. Every week we've added a little bit, especially in Texas and Oklahoma. Haven't really added a whole lot in these other places. They've just changed depending on where those thunderstorms have occurred. Now let's take a look at the jet stream. A little bit of a trough, Great Lakes in the Northeast as we start this week. We are going to see a big ridge in the west, and that's going to keep things on the warm side. Now, if you live in Florida, live in the southeast, you need to pay attention to your local forecast. Because this is a holiday weekend, we're recording this a little bit early, and so exactly where Dorian or the remnants of Dorian will be over the next several days, it's going to be a very slow mover. You have to pay a close attention to your local forecast, obviously. As we head through Wednesday, a little bit of a trough cutting into the ridge in the northern Rockies, still a light trough over the Great Lakes in the northeast. And as we go forward, you can see the ridge pops right back up in the west, although a trough trying to come into the Pacific Northwest by Friday. And then you can see still kind of troughy over the Great Lakes in the northeast, keeping you folks on the cool side. And we'll see that trough even coming farther inland in the west as we head through next weekend. All right, here's my 90-day outlook. September temperatures below normal for the northern plains, above normal for the east, Gulf Coast, and the west. No below normals for October. I'm going near normal for the northern half of the plains and the Great Lakes, above normal elsewhere across the lower 48. November temperatures then will go below normal western lakes into the northern plains, above normal again east, Gulf Coast, and the west. Precipitation over the next 90 days from the lower lakes to the Florida southeast region. I'm going above normal Four Corner region into western Mexico and up along the Canadian border and the Pacific Northwest. It looks like precipitation probably pretty close to below normal over the next 90 days.
That's a look across the country. Now here are some local forecasts. Bakersfield, California, lots of sunshine and hot on this Labor Day. High of 100 degrees. Bismarck, North Dakota, warm with a thunderstorm possible, high around 82. And finally, Little Rock, Arkansas, warm and humid with sunshine, high 93.
When we come back, a view from above the fields of Illinois, and later, a view from the road, the social media sideshow that follows scouts across the Midwest.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
Illinois and Iowa always run neck and neck when it comes to state average yields. This year, the biggest difference is in prevent plant. Illinois with more than 1.5 million acres left unplanted compared to Iowa at 463,000. Videographer Russ Natusco recently took to the skies above Illinois for a bird's eye view.
Honestly, I've been looking at it all spring and summer from the air, so.
You don't have to go far to see not good crops. Right over this way, there's 3 within a section there. And if you look at all the planted fields, there's holes and variability in all of them. The farther east you go, the worse it is. Wow. So I don't know where the 90 million acres of corn are planted. See in that field down there how you have square spots of the farm missing? Those are all the spots where the tractor almost got stuck trying to plant that field. When you see these barren fields, they're some of the best land that in the state of Illinois that was either mudded in or is left unplanted. So it's definitely not a bumper crop. Oh, if you look right off the nose of the airplane, there's just field after field after field that's not planted. That's just simply a guy trying to plant what he could plant and go around the worst of it. The USDA claimed that they used satellite imagery in that report, and I don't understand how a satellite image wouldn't show barren fields all over the place. So this is kind of the area where they grow a lot of seed corn. I hope that the seed industry is going to have enough seed for next year. So now we have a combination of a terrible crop and terrible prices. Not very much to look forward to.
I guess as a farmer, you always look for next year, right? Better luck next year, and this is a prime example of that because this crop is not very good, and I guess the best thing about agriculture is we get to try again.
Thanks, Russ. Well, another crop tour is in the books, and it's not all facts and figures. There's a little fun along the way. A view from the road. Next. The ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour is all about getting boots on the ground and getting numbers, important news you can use for everyone from traders to agribusinesses and of course the growers. But there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that makes a tour about so much more than facts and figures. I headed out on the eastern leg of the tour, and as you can see, our photographer Don Green was super excited to hit the road. But it was good Don rested because there was a lot to see and do along the way. We saw a lot of this in Northwest Ohio. Unfortunately, fields still too wet to plant.
Look this way too. We've gone through quite the stretch of prevent plant.
AgriTalk's Chip Flory there talking about some of the hard realities of this season that became historic for all the wrong reasons, spotting tons of prevent plant in South Dakota. And what we did see often had a lot of growing left to do. Jared Creed out on the tour, checking out corn in Cottonwood County in Minnesota, saying what he found was as immature as his friend.
Tall kid checking soybeans.
It can also be fun on the tour, especially when you send someone else to do the dirty work for you, right? And as it goes on, it gets a little weirder. Karen Braun getting a little measure crazy, even checking her Subway sandwich, but celebrating the end of the tour in her own unique way by doing a handstand. Now Ted Seifert on the western leg trying out his own version, celebrating his birthday while on the tour, saying on Twitter, quote, "Look, Ma, I'm finally taller than the corn in August." Davis Michelson of AgriTalk showing us his handsome news dog all tuckered out from the tour. We feel the same way, buddy. And that's going to wrap us up on this special edition of Ag Day. From all of us here on the show, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day. out in farm country.
Coverage of the 2019 ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by Pioneer, our premier sponsor, with support from IBM, RCIS, RAM, AeroVironment, Titan Tires, Farmable, and Farm Credit Services of America.